Hello everyone. So we'll continue the session. So we're talking about polity for prelims. We're sharing, and I was sharing the polity notes for prelims. So I'll continue doing that. So we in the previous class we ended at preamble. We talked about different things about preamble. We talked about jurist and any Balkiwala statement about preamble and all those stuff, right? So now what we will do is we'll talk about inner line permit. So today's agenda is what is today's agenda? So today's agenda is to talk about inner line permit, just a brief idea about inner line permit. And there are certain misconceptions about inner line permit, so we have to remove that. We'll talk about JSPSC, Joint State Public Service Commission. Again, certain important things. There are certain dichotomies, certain contradiction which happens because of which it is very difficult to remember all the provisions of JSPSC. So we have to, what do you say? And you have to see and you have to revise JSPSC again and again. Then what we will do after that, we'll do the most important thing for today's class, which is talking about national emergency. And we will not only talk about national emergency. See, national emergency and its provision along with precedent rules are very tricky, right? So we will do a parallel study with precedent rules. And how we will do it? I have made a separate, what do you say, sheet in this notes only. I have made a notes where we have do the what do you say, where I've done the parallel comparison between national emergency and precedent rule. And this is the slide, or this is the page which I'm talking about, national emergency and precedent rule. So we'll try to do a parallel study between them. If you do the parallel study between and comparison between any and precedent rule, it will become much easier to remember. So let's do that. And yes, these are very, very important, especially national emergency and precedent rule and its provisions and its comparison is important, very important. So let's go back and start from inner line permit so that we don't leave anything. So generally, there is a very what is we have certain misconception. First of all, these inner line permits are applied or applicable in certain northeastern states like Arunachal, Mizoram, Nagaland, among others. Now, what happens now? We generally feel that there are certain special funds and all those things which are provided for these regions. No, that is not the case. Neither a special council is set up, nor special funds are provided by government for areas under inner line permit. What is happening under these northeastern states, that is happening under Schedule 5 and 6, which is a different case altogether. Right. But for these inner line permit areas, there's no special fund or special council. What is the important thing which is needed for inner line permit is only an official travel document of entry is required for entry by non-domicile Indian citizens, right? So that's it. Nothing more, nothing less about inner line permit. So now let's talk about JSPSC again. It's very difficult to remember provisions of JSPSC. Why? First of all, it is created by an act of parliament. So you're creating it by an act of parliament on request of different states. Since it is a joint state public service commission now, so it is created by an act of parliament on request of different states. Second thing which makes it difficult. So it is created by an act of parliament. Now, the judges and everyone, they are appointed by president. Fine. Created by parliament, appointed by president, and then they are presenting report to each state governor. So see the dichotomy? Nothing is constant about them. So that's why it becomes very difficult to understand or remember JSPSC provisions. What happened again? Let's rewind it. So they are created by an act of parliament on the request of states. They are appointed. The different members are appointed by president. The judges are appointed by president, and then they are presenting reports to each state governor. So everything is different. So you have to take care of these provisions. Again, it's a statutory body, unlike UPSC, which is a constitutional body. JSPSC is a statutory body, right? Now, again, the year is 6 years or 62, whichever is earlier, right? 6 years or 62, whatever is earlier for the case of High Court, means JSPSC SC judges. Numbers of members of JSPSC in service condition are determined by president. As we have discussed earlier, they present report to each state governor and who places them before their respective state legislature. So remember these things. The three most important things about JSPSC are they're created by an act of parliament. Second thing, they're appointed by president. Third thing, they present report to each state governor and not to president. Right? They don't present report to president. We generally do mistake here. Now let's talk about national emergency and let's do a parallel comparison between national emergency and president rule. And we'll talk about citizenship in the next session. And citizenship also is a very dreaded topic. We don't want to read about citizenship. So first of all, let's focus here. Let's focus on the topic which is at present. So national emergency, what happens? See, we have various misnomers or misconception about national emergency. So what we feel is, and let's understand this. What they're saying is all the legislative power of state legislature is not suspended. It is not suspended, but it becomes subject to overriding power of parliament. So parliament has overriding power in the case of national emergency when it comes to state legislature. Now, what about executive? Now, state government is brought under complete control of center, but they are not suspended, right? So they are brought under complete control, but they are not suspended as such. And in president rule, they are dismissed, right? So this is the basic difference. Now, let's do a parallel study of national emergency and president rule to understand it in a better manner. So let's go to that sheet where I have discussed or where I have done the parallel study. Just a second. So yes, national emergency and precedent rule. So we'll do a parallel study. First of all, national emergency under Article 352. And when can it be proclaimed? Under the condition of war, external aggression, or armed rebellion, right? Now, precedent rule, it is under Article 356. And when is it implemented? On the condition, the constitutional mandate is on the failure of constitutional machinery in state. But you do know that it is misused a lot. So that's why SRI or my judgment came into picture. We'll talk about all those things. Now, what are the effects on fundamental rights in the case of national emergency and precedent rule? So what we are doing is a parallel study. It will help you not only in pre, but also in mains. So what you can do is when you have to do the parallel study between national emergency and precedent rule, I will share the PDF as I've said earlier. Just give me a WhatsApp message, or you can just go through this video again and again. You will understand it. Now let's talk about the effect on FRs. First of all the 6 fundamental rights under Article 19, freedom of speech and expression, they are automatically suspended. In which case? In the case of national emergency, if the national emergency is proclaimed on the grounds of war or external aggression. If the national emergency is proclaimed on grounds of war or external aggression, then all the 6 rights under Article 19 is automatically, what happens? Suspended. They are automatically suspended. Now, second scenario, president can also suspend rights to move any court for enforcement of fundamental rights under national emergency, except for Article 20 and 21. So 21 is right to life, and 20 I think is just see what is 20. So preventive detention, I guess so. Just see what is 20, right? So except for Article 20 and 21, in all the other cases, president can suspend your right to move court, right? Right, Article 32, right to constitutional remedies, that can be suspended for enforcement of fundamental rights under national emergency. And again, only those laws which are related to emergency are protected from being challenged, and not other laws. So whatever laws were related to emergency, they cannot be challenged, but other laws can be challenged. And also executive action taken under only such laws is protected. This is not very important. The other two things which we have read was important. 6 rights under Article 19 are suspended in the case of national emergency if national emergency is proclaimed on the grounds of war or external aggression. Similarly, president can stop you from moving court for enforcement of any FRs except Article 20 and 21. Now, what happens in the case of precedent rule? There is no effect on fundamental rights as such in the case of precedent rule. Now, let's talk about effect on center-state relation. What happens? What is the scenario? What is the effect on center-state relation in the case of national emergency as well as precedent rule? So, in the case of national emergency, we will talk about the effect on executive, legislature, as well as financial effect, and then and in the case of national emergency as well as in the case of precedent rule. So, in the case of national emergency, what happens? Center becomes entitled to give executive direction to state on any matter. But as you can see, they're not suspending the state government. They're giving directions, and they can give any kind of directions. They have overriding power, as we have discussed earlier. And we are talking about any here, Article 352 here. Now, in the case of legislative, Parliament becomes empowered to make laws on any subject mentioned in state list, right? Although legislative powers of state are not suspended, as we have discussed earlier, but it becomes subject to overriding power. So overriding power is there in both the cases. Center means legislative as well as executive. Now, what happens in the case of financial power? So in the case of financial power, president can modify the revenue distribution, the constitutional distribution of revenues between center and state. And remember, we are talking about national emergency here. And modification continue till the end of financial year in which emergency ceases to operate. Now, what about the effect of center-state or effect on center-state relationship in the case of precedent rule? Now, here, although in national emergency it was not dismissed, in precedent rule, state government is dismissed. Remember this, important. So this thing is important. Second thing, state legislature is either suspended or dissolved. Third thing is president administers state through governor and parliament makes laws for the state. In brief, executive and legislative power of state are assumed by the center. So are you understanding? But in the case of precedent rule, there's no effect on fundamental rights as such. So these Rajbala and all those things, they are related to Panchayati Raj and devolution of powers and all those things. So we'll talk about it later on. Before that, we have to talk about citizenship, which we'll do that in the next session. So that's it. Do a parallel study. Go through this video again and again to understand. And this is a very important thing. If you do the parallel study between precedent rule and national emergency, things will become much more clearer. So that's it for today's session, and I will see you in the next session. And yes, if you want the PDF, you can send me a message on WhatsApp. Thank you. And I will share the number in the description box. So that's it. Thank you.